Good afternoon. I'm Mike Ravalin. I'm the Coastal California rep for BASF. I also represent into Hawaii. I'd like to talk to you today about a review of chemistry on Priaxor, our fungicide, which you're using for coffee leaf rust, and how to correctly use it for best management practices to control this disease. I have not been to the islands. I'm actually heading there the first week of March. If you ever need to get hold of me, you'll see my email and my phone number listed. So very excited to be able to work with you and learn about your crops. Little history on CLR. I'm sure you're familiar with this, and then also where Priaxor fits into the picture. CLR was first detected in 2020. It's now moved to all the islands, causes defoliation, reduces yield, and ultimately can kill coffee trees if not controlled. We got the addition of the Section 18, which is an emergency use exemption by the EPA in May of last year. Actually expires May of this year, so keep that in mind. We're working to renew it, plus we're working to add it to the regular label. Very important though, timing and proper usage of Priaxor for this disease. So I think we're in a disease management stage. We're not really in a disease prevention stage, and it's really important that we create programs to control the spread of this disease throughout your individual plantations or throughout the islands. I'm used to dealing with programs in such things as grapes for powdery mildew. That would be wine grapes, also lettuce, downy mildew. So the use of a chemical in a program is very familiar to me. That's mostly what I'll talk about. A little bit of the symptom review and the biology review of CLR. It appears on the lower leaves, usually where the water coagulates on the edges or the tips, but also on the lower leaves of the coffee tree. The spores require water, either rain or dew or some type of irrigation to germinate. But the spores germinate very fast, which is a problem for us in terms of control. They germinate in 2 to 4 hours. They can spread by wind or rain or personal contact or equipment contact. And once they're spread, they can affect a plant or infect a plant, more appropriately, within 24 to 48 hours. So this is a very rapidly moving disease, and it spreads very, very quickly. The problem is, or one of the main problems is, we don't see the lesions for 4 to 6 weeks. So the plant's already infected by the time we identify it's been infected. Therefore, we really need a management program. So best disease management practices, and these are all off of University of Hawaii's website. I think they've done great work over there in trying to help you deal with this disease, and I applaud everyone who's had a part in that. First thing to say is maintain healthy plants. Can't emphasize this enough. As part of a management program, you need to keep the plants healthy enough to be able to deal with the disease as long as possible. Sanitation of infected materials, again, very important. Getting rid of the material that's carrying the disease spores, getting it off the plantation or disposing of it somehow is important. Timely pruning and proper pruning techniques. I'm not an expert on coffee at all. I know very little about it. I've studied this disease for only a couple months, but your cultural techniques, how you treat your orchard is going to be very important, and pruning is probably going to be the most important part of that. Also, removal of unwanted plants and wild coffee seedlings will be very important. And then lastly, where I fit in with BASF, proper and timely pesticide usage. And what that really means, again, in disease management, not disease prevention. So let's talk a little bit about the CLR fungicides in Hawaii and what led to the Section 18 for Priaxor, and then how to best use it. So if you were in Latin America, you would have a lot less regulation, and the regulation comes from the government, the US government, and things that are allowed to be used in Latin America are not allowed to be used in the US, and probably never will be. Also, contact fungicides. We have a couple of them. We need to make sure we understand what they're doing. Biofungicides, we have a couple of them. We need to understand what they're doing. And most importantly for me, Priaxor fungicide, the Section 18, how to use the material, but also for you to understand what it will and will not do. So my goal is to give you the proper expectations and the proper guidance on how to use this. If we were in Latin America, what you would see is you would have access to a material that could be drenched on the soil. And this material would be sucked up into the coffee plant and probably give you about 90 days of prevention. So even though the spores germinate and infect the plant, the material inside would be there preventatively, stopping them from successfully infecting the plant. We do not have that material and probably never will. The contact fungicides you're very familiar with, or should be, because you've been spraying them for a few years. And whether they are one of the many copper products or whether they are oxidate, which is based on peracetic acid and hydrogen peroxide, they both hit the fungus and basically burn the top off. So you could argue on one hand that they are curative, but it only cures what's on the outside, things that it comes in contact with. If the fungus is in the leaf already infected, it will not kill the part of the fungus in the leaf. We do have some biofungicides. You know these as Serenade ASO or double nickel. They're bacillus compounds. BASF has one itself, so I'm very familiar with them. We're not registered in coffee at this point. The thing to remember is these products, again, are on the outside of the leaf. Mostly they're working to outpopulate the bad fungus spores, in this case coffee leaf rust, on the outside of the leaf. And to some degree they make metabolites that can attack the fungus. But again, preventative, that's the key, preventative. And lastly, you have the new Section 18 from last May on Priaxor. So let's look at Priaxor specifically. It's two compounds in one product, and one of these compounds is called pyraxystrobin. This is a locally systemic product. So if you have a spray droplet on the plant, it will move a little bit outside of that spray droplet area. It will also move through the leaf top to bottom, so below that spray area is basically treated also. That's one of the products. Key thing to remember is this works at one site of action on the fungus, so it only attacks one spot on the fungus. The second product, Fluxapyroxad, is more systemic. It's xylem systemic. It's also translaminar, but it also works only on one site of the fungus. So between the two of them, yes, you're working on two sites. That's why they're mixed together. They're both very active on coffee leaf rust, but at the same time, we have to use these properly. So what is properly? Well, 7.14 ounces is the only rate you can use because the Section 18 designates that. It has a 12-hour reentry, a 45-day to harvest interval. You need to follow all of the use directions that are on the label and the section 18. You need to only use this 2 times per year, and you need to know that it's going to expire in May of 22. And yes, we will try to renew it without a hiccup in the middle. There are some side benefits to pyraclostrobin, and actually I think they'll fit into your problem nicely. So the side benefit, we usually just refer to it as plant health. Plant health is really an increase in the photosynthesis rate of a plant for about 15 days, an increase in nitrogen assimilation, so the plant is bringing up and making plant parts out of nitrogen faster than it normally would. It's also making more carbohydrates faster than it normally would. And we also reduce stress hormone formation, most importantly ethylene and endobutyric acid. We also reduce oxidative stress. Now, this sounds like a lot for a side benefit, but there's a ton of research going back to 2004 to document it all. So a good product with 2 good active ingredients that are very good on rust, at the same time, some side benefits. What do those side benefits add up to, besides good control of coffee leaf rust? Well, additional root and vegetative growth, additional crop weight, so yield, proven very often in almonds, lettuce, cabbage. Don't think there's any coffee studies, but that would be interesting. Earlier ripening of wine grapes, we bring the crop to harvest a little sooner. And like I said, reduction in the formation of plant stress hormones. So when a plant's under attack, it tends to form senescence hormones like ethylene, and we slow that down. You can't stop it completely, but we slow it down. So giving the chance to be a little healthier when it's under the attack of the disease is a good thing, and I think we can benefit from it in this case. Just a picture of root development. So untreated and treated, these happen to be peppers, and you can see how much root mass we add. So just a picture to kind of show the point. That second ingredient, fluxapyroxad, it is xylem systemic, and the key to this product is it moves very consistently throughout the plant's leaf. Now it's only in the xylem, so wherever that spray droplet is, it only moves up and out through the leaf. It does not go down into the roots, does not come back through the phloem, and then move up and out through the plant. So only in the xylem, only out with the water stream in the plant. It is very stable chemistry, and usually in this case I would say we're looking at 21 days, sometimes maybe 28, but I think the number to bank on is about 21 days potential residual for the control of coffee leaf rust. You're going to need 2 applications because this is a very high pressure disease. I'm going to suggest you use it twice. And on top of that, your timing is critical. This is a preventative treatment. This is not a curative treatment, and to my knowledge, you have no curative actions to be taken for coffee leaf rust. Everything is preventative, and I need you to think of it that way. Again, some limited plant health benefits, and hopefully coffee will respond like other crops that I deal with. This is just a little picture to show you how the fluxapyroxad moves in the xylem. So on a leaf surface, there's your spray droplet, the blue on top. It slowly embeds itself in the wax, and it forms reservoirs in the waxy layer in the upper epidermis. Then it slowly lets itself into the xylem and moves up and out. This is why we get extended control. 21 days to 28 days is really very good control. Again, control is prevention. If you do have an infection, it in the leaf will most likely kill it. That's not a guarantee, but it will most likely kill it. But you're not going to get coverage throughout the whole plant, so you won't stop the plant from being infected. Just parts of the plant, in this case, the leaf. So considerations in your coffee leaf rust spray program and the planning of that. First thing, treat the new flush of growth with Priaxor. Post-pruning would be my suggestion, because I think that's when a lot of spread's going to happen. So you prune, you get your new flush. That's usually your wet season. And that's when I would do my first treatment, when that flush is really pushing hard. As you do this, watch the different areas of your plantation or your grove. Don't necessarily treat them all at once, not by the calendar, but as each area flushes. I realize this is a little harder, but you probably have small microclimates in your field, and you need to treat the flush. That can't be stressed enough. That's when you're going to get the best use of this product. So once you've done that, you need to move to alternate chemistry. And I'm going to tell you 21 days later. If something goes wrong and you're out at 28, it's not the end of the world, but I would try for 21 days later. What are you going to treat with? Well, most likely a copper product or oxidate or one of the biofungicides I mentioned earlier. Those are the products. We're just putting something in the middle of our two treatments that we want to stave off resistance, because this disease is so aggressive that mutations and resistance are likely to happen. So we need to put something in the middle to prevent our product, which is probably the best thing you have, from becoming less useful to you. Now, when you treat with this copper or oxidate or one of the biofungicides, you're going to go a certain amount of time, usually 7 to 14 days later, depending on what product you chose, and you're going to retreat. So here's how I would look at that. If you use copper, I think you can make it 14 days before you retreat, just based on how long copper residuals will last on the outside of your leaf surface. If you used oxidate, I'm going to suggest you only go 7 days, based on the fact that the oxidate probably is gone off the leaf surface within about 30 minutes to an hour. So after that, you're really unprotected, except for whatever tiny layer of Priaxor lasts from your first spray. And if you use a biofungicide, I'm going to suggest you retreat 10 days later. The reason is those biofungicides have a life. Their whole population has a life, and it's probably 10 days, maybe 14 at the very longest. But what we don't want to create is any gaps in between treatments. So your first spray Priaxor, your second spray an alternate chemistry, your third spray a retreatment of Priaxor, and then a retreat with any alternate product as necessary. Now, what does as necessary mean? I think we have to look at the goal. The goal is to make it to the dry season, to make it when things aren't getting moved around, splashed around, or quite as infective as they are in the wet season. So you'll have to come back potentially with copper or oxidate or one of the biofungicides and retreat until you get into these lower pressure times. And because coffee leaf rust spreads in wind, you may have to even treat through the dry season. It just depends kind of on your unique situation. I think it all starts though with a good program, watching the new flush and getting that first treatment on. Now, I know some people are probably tempted to hold off until 45 days before harvest and make a treatment. You could do that. You would just have to get through the wet season with one Priaxor treatment. I prefer getting the 2 shots on early and trying to get the best control during your heaviest infestation season and the biggest flush. So that's the way I would treat it. One last thing, chemicals are only as good as the application. I preach on that a lot in California. So, keep an eye on your sprayer and your workers and your nozzles. Make sure everything is getting applied as best you can. The new nozzle on the left shows what a spray pattern should look like. And if you look towards the center and the right side, you'll see what damaged nozzles look like. So, please get good spray coverage. It's critical for this disease. A lot of the coffee leaf rust infects from the bottom, so the more bottom-up spraying you can do, probably the better. There are some surfactants allowed with the Section 18s, so work with your local supplier to get one that's appropriate for your equipment. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. Thank you to Andrea. And like I said, I'll be headed that way at the end of the month and look forward to working with you. Appreciate the support. Have a good evening.